In the past year, the entire real estate industry has changed. Here in Southwest Florida, we really are a micro market that's unique into itself. So if you've been considering a move to Cape Coral, Fort Myers, or any of the Southwest Florida region, then you might want to know what's been going on in 2024 and how we've gotten to where we are now, and then have some insight into what you can expect in 2025. All right, let's jump right in. Chelsea here from Gather Home Group with Keller Williams, Fort Myers, and the Highlands, bringing you another segment of Living in Southwest Florida. If you didn't catch last year's predictions, feel free to click up top and go check out and see how right or wrong I was. I want to take a quick second to pat myself on the back because I'd like to think I was pretty close to being spot on. Before we dive into 2025, I want to take a quick moment to look back at 2024, discuss some of those factors that impacted the markets, and review some of the data. The Southwest Florida housing market, which encompasses areas such as Naples, Fort Myers, and Cape Coral, all experienced significant shifts in 2024. These changes were driven by many factors: economic adjustments, rising insurance costs, and lingering impacts from severe weather, just to name a few. Let's start first with some data. Follow me over to the computer. All right, so we are going to go ahead and go through the data. I am using a program called Domus Analytics, which is a provider provided to our MLS system. It tracks all of the MLS data for the entire region. We can get very granular on data and look at like waterfront homes versus non-waterfront homes, or specific neighborhoods like zip codes and so forth. But I'm going to be looking at a whole for now, so we can kind of just look at the whole area. Let's go ahead and dive on in. It's very nice and sunny out there right now. I hope it's sunny where you guys are too. For December 2024, we ended the year at $427,250 as our median sales price. That was 2.9% down from December of 2023, which was $440,000. Now you can notice here, these statistics are running all the way back to January of 2018. So you can see this rise here for COVID. COVID would have started of March of 2020, and we see a little dip at the beginning, and then we just take off. So we are trending still pretty high. You can see this trend line here is still above where we're at. We did dip down through the year, but we started the year, if we're looking year over year, December is going to be our most recent statistics. And from December, we shot up. So April was our highest month at $475,000. And then stereotypically, we do see a little drop every year after the snowbird season for the summer, because that's our hot time and nobody wants to be here, not even us. So, kidding. But we dropped to a low in September of $402,000. And then you can see we rallied back and we ended the year at $427,250. November was at $420,000. Now, this is a lagging statistic. And so something I just want to make sure that people understand is that sales price data does come from sales that happened and went under contract, 30, 60 days prior. So, this would have been homes that were going under contracts November after the election, and for the most part, and then closing. So we see a little rise after the election here. Let's go talk about closed sales. So you can see we ended the year with 1,838 homes sold, which was just slightly higher than the year prior. We closed 14 more houses than 2023 at 1,824. Now, again, you can see the rise here. We had ended December. January was less, just simply because, again, these houses went under contract 30 days prior. December with the holidays, maybe less houses went under under contract. And so January sees a little bit of a dip going into it, but then we spike off. And by March, we're doing pretty strong in terms of amount of closed sales. We're still trucking, at least with kind of the midpoint of where a lot of these are, especially if we discount COVID years. So if we go back prior COVID, this section of data really isn't that much different than this section of data. They are still very similar to each other. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to kind of jump around through these a little bit. The next one I want to look at is new listings. So we've looked at how many went off the market, but here is how many came on. So we are at 3,921, and this was 30% more new listings than the year prior. We got an extra 921 homes that hit the market at the end of December. Our biggest month of inventory was January. And I want you guys to look at this spike. So we started December at 3,000 homes going on market. Again, we're in the middle of the holiday season. December is going to be one of those lower months for listings because people are trying to get through the holidays. And then snowbirds, or at least where sellers have gotten through the holidays and they've gotten through, and they have decided to go ahead and hit the market. And so January ends up being a huge month for new listings. Definitely our highest month of new listings. So we are now sitting at 3,921. Again, you can kind of see we're kind of in the middle of the pack, especially in these months leading up prior to COVID. You can see the little line is where we are at in comparison to the rest. And we were hitting right about the same as we were previously. December had been 3188 in 2018. 2019's December, 2932. A little bit more, but not significantly, because we're seeing several of these months were higher in comparison to this year, in comparison to these years. I like to look at these years more than the COVID years because the COVID years were just so darn strange, really. Let's go on. Really, we're looking at how many homes go on, how many homes come off. I'm going to circle back around to pendings because I think that's really one of my favorite statistics to look at. But let's go over to months of inventory. Now, months of inventory is basically an absorption rate. So it is, if we stopped taking new homes onto the market today, what would that look like for the time length that it would take us to sell every single one? And a balanced market, here they're going to count 5 to 7 months as a balanced market. And anything less than 5 months is going to be a seller's market. Anything above 7 months is going to be a buyer's market. In December, we ended up at 9.3. So we are absolutely in a seller's market at this point. We did spend a good portion of the year balanced. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the months, we were in a balanced market last year. We did start the year also slightly buyer's market, 7.1 last December. And with all those new listings that came in January, you could see that big spike in the last slide. And here it is showing up in our months of inventory. 9.5 was last January. So throughout the year, we have absorbed 0.2 months total by the end of the year between January and December. But, we did spend a lot of the year balanced. Let's look at pendings. And this is my favorite because a lot of those previous statistics are lagging indicators. They aren't going to be the ones that are happening now in the moment, right? They're, again, 30, 60 days ago, 45 days ago. And so this statistic, pending sales, is showing us what's happening in real time. How many buyers are out there actively buying homes? According to the stats, there are actually 11% more buyers out there in this past December than there were in 2023 that were writing contracts. So we went from 1,500 in 2023 to end out the year. And then we started spiking up through snowbird season. We had gone all the way up to 29.54. And you can see at March of 2024, when everybody's talking about the world is ending, it's still one of the highest months we have had in terms of pending sales and contracts written, especially when we take out all these COVID years. If we take out, I don't think I can do that, but if we take out from here, I don't know, let's say that January is probably, like, that is pretty much all but like 3 of the months that in the entire last 8 years. So we were still selling on par, on trend, like we had been prior to COVID. We did have more buyers buying. This dip right here, October, was our slowest month for buyers buying, and that makes sense. It's right before the election. It is right before, while we're going through Milton and Helene. And so people are putting their searches on hold and waiting to see what's going to happen with the hurricanes and what's going to happen with the election. And then once those things are done, and we've started to pick up. Mortgage rates. No surprise here. Mortgage rates have been high coming out of COVID. Statistically, the trend for the interest rates is that 8% is the historical trend line. So we are still under the historical trend line. We are slightly down year over year. I tend to not focus too much on mortgage interest rates because that is a different industry, in my opinion. While we do work in harmony together and we do influence each other, mortgage rates can really depend on somebody's credit and, worthiness and debt to income ratios and things like that. And I am not a lender, and so I'm not going to step on a lender's toes. That's really something for people to talk to their own lender about. But you can kind of see here that it did come down a little bit in December coming out of the election. Distress listings. Everybody's worried about a market crash. We are still sitting incredibly low for distressed listings. 0.3% of homes on the market are distressed. We don't even have a percentage point. And we didn't last year, and that's not really much of a surprise. You can see this is obviously once April 2020, people were starting to panic. We had up to 2.6, but prior to COVID, it wasn't unheard of to be 1 to 2, somewhere in the 1 to 2 range. And we are still sitting at 0.3. So people have a lot of equity in their homes, and they are not in distressed positions as significantly as in markets past, at least. Days on market. Let's look at that. So days on market pending says how many days did it take from when it went on the market to go into pending status or get a contract on it. And right now in the region, we're looking at 50 days on market, which, again, historically similar to what years past have been prior COVID. We got down to the 6, 7s, and 8s. I think a lot of sellers nowadays realize that that's not going to be pretty typical. But we are sitting at 50, which is, more than we were seeing during the beginning of the year as we were absorbing all that extra data or all those extra homes. And it got a little bit higher during the summer months, understandably, since that was our lowest part for pending. Remember, here's our new pendings. And I'm going to go back to this statistic. You can see we were coming down a little bit, and that's August, September, October, which correlates with when there are more days on market. And so we're looking at 50, which was historically pretty on average. And then the last thing I really want to show you guys is going to be the percentage of the list price received. Actually, let's look at original list price. This is from when they first tried to put it on the market whether or not they've done reductions, or where they ultimately ended up. Now, before I do show you this one, I kind of want to preference that this is my least favorite statistic to show. And that's because I feel like a lot of people get stuck in their head, oh, well, that means I automatically need to offer on the house that I like, this percentage off. But we're dealing with people here. We are dealing with individuals, and one person may have, we can't compare the person who competitively priced their home in today's market versus the person who had unrealistic expectations. So we really need to look at the house you like and the individual circumstances surrounding that house to really craft what is market value for that specific house. So while I'm going to show you this number, I just want you to know that's really not something that you should be leaning too heavily on. I think that this is more for my sellers out there. If they're looking to price their home, please know that you need to be somewhat competitive, because there is some sort of concessions that we're going to see on this number. List price is not 100% sales price to list price any longer. But I saw a house just 2 weeks ago that listed under market value, did create a bidding war, and went for $20,000 more than their ask price because they started competitively in the beginning. They didn't overprice out the gate. And I know that's awfully hard to kind of tell in a downward trending market on, whether or not you're pricing competitively or not. They definitely came in under market value and got bidded up. But they're not going to follow this trend. They're going to buck the statistic. So we are going to look at this, which says that the original list price received was running somewhere around 92%. So people who list their house, by the time that they did any price reductions and then accepted something, they were looking at about 92% of where they had started. Again, not everybody though. Not everybody. This was less than a year ago. So it does show that we looked like we were coming in a downward trending market, which followed along with that sales price too. Don't forget, the sales price came down. I think we were looking at 2.7% previously, and the list price to sales price was 1.5. So that's not the statistic I'm looking for. Median sales price was down 2.9. So both were showing that we were in a downward trending market. Now, let's go talk about why. There were several factors that impacted on these numbers. First off, buyer affordability changed significantly year over year. Not only did we see inflation spike, where people were struggling for more of their basic necessities, much less saving for a down payment on a home, there were also interest rates that remained higher. I do want to point out, though, that as much as we discuss interest rates impacting the markets, here in Southwest Florida, we do have a higher percentage of cash sales than other parts of the country. Because this is still considered a relatively affordable location than other parts of the country, we see either people cashing out in higher cost locations and buying all cash here, or we see second home or investors who are going to be paying cash as well. In addition to inflation and interest rates, the conversation around homeowners insurances did continue. There are less carriers than there have been in the past, and homeowners insurances have gone up for many people. I will say, though, that I have been finding that as I talk to those in other parts of the country, the averages have seemed to be pretty similar. For example, the insurance policy on my new construction home is about $1,350 a year. And while this is very subjective to things like age and location and material used in the home, I'm highlighting this so that people can see that there are potentially affordable options out there. Regardless, though, the narrative has been about high insurance costs, and that impacts public perception. And speaking of insurances against storms, last year we also still saw some fallout impacting us from those storms. Early on in 2024, we saw a jump in inventory, and I believe that was partially impacted by residual rumblings from Hurricane Ian. What I mean by that is when Ian hit us in late 2022, it meant that a lot of people were still working on getting damages fixed throughout 2023. I spoke with many homeowners who wrapped up their repairs in late 2023 and then wanted to wait until the new year to list their house. So while we had low inventory in 2023, that additional inventory eventually hit the market and caused us to have an abundance. Also, we did have a more active hurricane season, which made the market go quiet while everyone waited to see the outcomes. Hurricanes are fascinating reason to me. In the moment, they are absolutely scary to deal with. But I also keep thinking that we forget about human ingenuity sometimes. Between Ian and Milton, we saw people figure out how to tape up doorways, install flood barrier systems, and increase elevations or building safety standards in order to overcome flooding. We've also seen natural disasters hit everywhere. Right now we have wildfires out of control, and I think a snowstorm is hitting somewhere. We saw mudslides last year as well. I think at this point we're going to have a hard time finding an area that's completely impervious to natural disaster. Also, let's not forget about the election cycle. It seems that in years past, the Fed has tried to keep the economy fairly stable by keeping mortgage rates pretty even. They did do that, although it had been higher than many had hoped. Also, some buyers will wait to see who's the winner and will leave the marketplace for a couple months leading up to the election. Then, coming out of the election, there's basically a small vacuum from everyone returning again. There's no getting around that a new administration will mean new rules. Interestingly enough, there was an infographic going around for a bit showing that the years after an election year and how well the market did with that. 9 of the last 11 election cycles brought a better year for real estate after the election. That means that no matter who was the winner, there was optimism afterwards and markets did well. Because of some of these factors though, namely hurricane safety and preparedness, as well as those insurance costs, we saw a shift in buyer preference. Buyers are requesting more often to be more inland. No longer are buyers flocking to be as close to the water as possible, and this is causing more demand for areas that may have been a little bit more inland, where the elevations tend to be a little higher. Locations like Lehigh Acres, North Cape Coral, and Babcock Ranch saw spikes of interest thanks to their affordability, higher elevations, and access to new construction. We also saw a move away from condos, which has created a lot of softening in the condo markets. This has to do with the new regulations and the rules surrounding condos. After the Surfside condo collapse in Miami a few years back, regulation went into place about disclosures of building practices as well as having fully funded reserves, which is something that many communities had not done. In order to get to the correct reserve levels, some communities are required to do some pretty heavy assessments, and with those lingering costs, many homeowners decided to opt for the single family when buying or villa housing instead. And we've seen a move more towards new construction. Builders are also feeling that pinch of the buyer's market, and they are trying to compensate by offering incentives like discounted prices or upgrades, concessions on closing costs, rate buydowns. These offerings, combined with the fact that they have lower insurance costs and most are built to higher hurricane standards, means that they've become a pretty desirable segment of the market. The best deals are being found in developments where they've built faster than they can absorb the inventory, and so the builders are trying to get the homes off their books. Let's talk 2025. Certainly I'm hoping that election optimism will happen again this year. Real estate markets are hyper-localized. As a whole, I expect to see a continued trend towards balanced and buyers markets with a continuation of the preferences for newer construction, out of flood zones, and single-family homes. Let's face it, sellers, we are not in a pandemic. That was like winning the Mega Millions and the Powerball on the same night, and it just does not happen. And while it may look like we've come down year over year historically, we are still above the historical trend line. And so in other words, we've been returning to a sense of normalcy. In the meantime though, I do think our higher inventory is going to continue to keep us in a buyer's market. The fact is, people are still here buying. As you can see from the data I showed you before, we do still have buyers out there buying. In fact, this December, there were more buyers than the year prior. But I think that as we still get normalized from COVID, Hurricane Ian's inventory gets soaked up, and people's transition continues with new life stages, we're going to also continue to see sellers selling at a faster rate than can be absorbed, which will continue to keep our inventory on the high side and keep our prices in check. Experts are predicting that the Southwest Florida market will stabilize in 2025. While home prices may not rebound significantly, the rate of decline is expected to slow, and a more balanced supply-demand will create a healthier market environment. With these conditions in play, I do expect to see it remain favorable for buyers, and sellers are starting to realize that there may be some negotiation in either price or terms. We'll likely see resale continue to try to keep up with the builders' incentives and either come down in price or offer closing cost assistance or rate buydowns. I also expect to see some regional variation as well. I think the hardest hit areas continue to decline will be the vulnerable zones like coastal areas prone to flooding or with higher insurance costs. and areas with less vulnerability or newer amenities will see some modest growth. Lastly, I want to point out that Southwest Florida will continue to be a location that will be remaining highly attractive. Retirees, snowbirds, remote workers will all still want to come to our warm climate, quality of life, and our beaches. And no matter where people live, they will still need to move due to life changes. People still get married, have babies, become empty nesters, go through divorce, go back to school, get a promotion, deal with the death of a loved one. Life still happens. At the end of the day, it boils down to this. The Southwest Florida housing market in 2025 is poised for a period of stabilization and slower growth. While buyers will enjoy favorable conditions, sellers are going to need to adjust their strategies to succeed in a competitive environment. All right, so before we wrap this up, please let me know in the comments what you think about the numbers and what your predictions are going to be for 2025. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have any questions about the area, then feel free to reach out. I have all of my contact information below in the description on my Linktree. On that Linktree, you could also find the links to my 96-page guide to moving to Lee County, as well as direct access to MLS to go ahead and search for homes on my website. Or if you want to pick my brain and discuss your ins and outs of your own personal situation, then feel free to book an appointment with me. There's absolutely no obligation, and I absolutely love jumping on video calls with people and talking about what their needs are and whether or not this is going to be a good fit for them. And then we look together too to see what we can find. As a heads up, my video schedule can sometimes be erratic. I'm a realtor, but I'm also a mom and a volunteer in our community, and I make these videos when I have a spare moment from serving my community. So I really recommend that if you like more of these videos, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you'll see when I drop another one. Also, while we may not be on here daily, we do post pretty much daily over on social media things that maybe you find of interest, like weekly articles and information that you might find handy as to insights about what life in Florida will look like. As always, we really appreciate it when you leave us a comment and hit that like button, subscribe button, and notification bells so that you can be notified when we drop future videos that may help you with living in Southwest Florida. Again, my name is Chelsea Robinson. I am with Gather Home Group with Keller Williams, Fort Myers, and the Islands. And thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I wish you much health and happiness.